Meryl Streep exits a small theater in downtown Boston, clutching her script as the evening rain begins to fall, when she notices a young woman frantically trying to shield a tiny bundle from the downpour, her desperate attempts to keep her baby dry, revealing weathered hands and weary eyes that have seen too much heartache for someone so young. What Meryl does next will not only transform this mother's shattered life, but also challenge everything you thought you knew about true compassion in a world that often looks away. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The rehearsal had run late, leaving Meryl tired but satisfied with the progress they'd made on the new film project. Women Rising was a passion project she'd pursued for years, stories of women overcoming impossible odds, and Boston in early spring provided the perfect backdrop for its raw emotion. She pulled her light jacket tighter against the evening chill as she stepped out of the theater's side door, nodding goodbye to the security guard who tipped his hat in respect. The parking lot was nearly empty now, most of the cast and crew having departed hours earlier. Meryl had stayed behind to work through a particularly difficult scene, wanting to ensure she captured the nuance of a woman rebuilding her life from nothing. Little did she know that very story was unfolding in real time just yards away. As she walked toward her car, keys in hand, a sound caught her attention, the unmistakable cry of an infant, quickly hushed. Meryl paused, her eyes scanning the dimly lit lot until they settled on an older sedan parked in the farthest corner. Something about it seemed off. The windows were partially fogged, and through the condensation, she could make out movement inside, acting on instinct rather than caution. Meryl changed direction and walked slowly toward the vehicle. As she drew closer, she noticed details that told a story more heartbreaking than any script. Clothes hanging from hooks on the interior, a makeshift curtain across the back window, and what appeared to be boxes of belongings stacked in the back seat. The car wasn't just being used for transportation, it was being lived in. Meryl approached carefully, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. When she was a few feet away, the driver's window rolled down just a crack. A woman's face appeared, young but with exhaustion etched into every feature. Their eyes met briefly before the woman looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Hi there," Meryl said, keeping her voice soft and warm. "I'm sorry to intrude. I heard a baby and just wanted to make sure everything's okay." The woman, inside, tensed visibly. "We're fine, thank you," she replied, her tone a mixture of pride and fear. Meryl nodded, respecting the boundary, but noticing how the woman's arms cradled a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a collection of mismatched baby blankets. "It's getting cold tonight. The forecast mentioned more rain." The window began to roll up slowly, a clear sign that the conversation was unwelcome. "We'll be moving along soon," the woman said, although the statement lacked conviction. As Meryl stepped back, she heard it, a small concerning cough from the baby. It was the kind of sound that any mother would recognize, the beginning of something that could quickly worsen without proper warmth and care. Instead of returning to her car, Meryl made a decision. She walked to the 24-hour pharmacy she'd noticed down the block, her mind racing with thoughts. Inside, she moved purposefully through the aisles, filling a basket with essentials: infant fever reducer, cough medicine suitable for babies, formula, diapers, wipes, and a thick, soft blanket still in its packaging. She added bottled water, some ready-to-eat foods that didn't require preparation, and as an afterthought, a pair of warm socks for the mother. The cashier raised an eyebrow at the eclectic midnight purchase, but said nothing as Meryl paid and declined, a bag instead keeping the items visible in her arms. When she returned to the parking lot, the car was still there. Meryl approached again, this time stopping at a respectful distance. The window didn't open, but she could feel eyes watching her cautiously from inside. "I've left some things here that might help," Meryl said, carefully placing the supplies on the hood of the car where they could be clearly seen. No pressure, no strings attached. She pulled a small notepad from her purse, wrote down her personal cell number, and placed it with the items. "If you need anything at all, please call day or night." Meryl stepped back, giving one last gentle smile toward the window before turning to leave. As she walked away, she heard the car door open slightly, then close again. She didn't look back, knowing that dignity required privacy. In her own car, Meryl sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. The scene she'd just witnessed felt more real and raw than any she'd ever portrayed on screen. She thought of her own daughters, now grown, and how fortunate they had been. She thought of the character she was playing, a woman who sees injustice and refuses to look away. As she started the engine, Meryl glanced in her rearview mirror. In the dim glow of the parking lot lights, she could see a slender arm reaching out from the car window, quickly gathering the supplies before retreating back inside. Something shifted in her that night. The mother and baby in that car weren't characters in a script. They were real people with a story Meryl couldn't ignore. She drove away with a resolve that surprised even herself. This wasn't the end of their encounter. It was only the beginning. What Meryl Streep would do next would change not only the lives of that young mother and her baby, but would challenge her own understanding of what it truly means to help someone in need. And for the young woman named Sarah, huddled in her car with baby Emma cradled against her chest, the appearance of the famous actress would become the unexpected turning point in a story that had seemed destined for tragedy. Morning. Light filtered through the car windows as Sarah woke with a start. Baby Emma stirred against her chest, making those small sounds that always tugged at her heart. For a moment, Sarah forgot their circumstances, the cramped back seat that had been their home for the past 3 months, the constant fear of being discovered, the gnawing uncertainty of each day. Then she remembered the woman from last night. Not just any woman, Meryl Streep. Sarah wasn't a movie buff, but anyone would recognize those distinctive features, that commanding yet gentle presence. What she couldn't understand was why someone like Meryl Streep would stop to help them. Sarah glanced at the supplies still neatly arranged on the passenger seat, the medicine that had helped ease Emma's cough, the formula that was higher quality than what she could usually afford, the impossibly soft blanket that now kept her daughter warm, and beneath it all, a handwritten note with a phone number. "We don't need charity," Sarah whispered to herself, though her hand contradicted her words as it reached for the baby formula. Across town, Meryl sat in her hotel suite, phone in hand. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the image of the young mother and baby in that old sedan. She'd worked with countless charities over the years, donated to shelters, attended fundraisers, but this was different. This was immediate, personal. Meryl checked her phone again. No calls from the number she'd given out. With a determined sigh, she made a decision. An hour later, Meryl pulled into the same parking lot. The sedan was still there, parked in the same corner spot. Relief flooded through her. They hadn't left. She approached carefully, carrying a small thermal bag. Sarah noticed her immediately, tensing as she watched Meryl's approach through the window. This time, however, curiosity battled with caution. When Meryl was a few feet away, Sarah lowered the window slightly. "You came back," she said, her voice betraying surprise. Meryl smiled, keeping a respectful distance. "I brought coffee and breakfast," she said, lifting the bag slightly. "Nothing fancy, just some bagels and fruit. I'm Meryl, by the way." "I know." "Who you are," Sarah replied, her tone neutral. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "I'm Sarah, and this is Emma." The baby chose that moment to peek out from her blankets, wide eyes taking in the stranger outside their safe space. Meryl's expression softened. "Nice to meet you both, Sarah and Emma." She gestured to a nearby bench. "Would you like to join?" "Me? Or I can leave this with you if you prefer to be alone." Sarah glanced around, checking for onlookers or signs of trouble, a habit born of necessity. Finding none, she made a decision that surprised even herself. "Give me a minute." She emerged from the car holding Emma carefully against her shoulder, a worn diaper bag slung over her other arm. Meryl noted how protectively Sarah held her daughter, how her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. This was a mother who, despite everything, was fiercely devoted to her child's safety. They sat on opposite ends of the bench, Sarah positioning herself so she could see anyone approaching. Emma, now more alert, studied Meryl with the unfiltered curiosity of infancy. "She's beautiful," Meryl said, offering Sarah a coffee cup. "How old is she?" 4 months next week." Sarah accepted the coffee with her free hand, the warmth seeping into fingers that had been cold for too long. "Thank you, for this and for last night." Meryl simply nodded, understanding that too much sympathy might feel patronizing. "The medicine helped?" "Yes." Sarah looked down at Emma, whose cough had indeed improved. I'm usually more prepared. I always have medicine for her. Things have just been difficult," Meryl supplied when Sarah's voice trailed off. Sarah gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's one way to put it." They sat in silence for a moment, the morning traffic creating a backdrop of white noise. Meryl didn't push, didn't pry. She simply opened the bag and offered Sarah a bagel, which was accepted after only slight hesitation. "I'm 24, Sarah suddenly said, as if answering a question Meryl hadn't asked. "I was studying nursing before." She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything that had gone wrong. "Before everything fell apart." Meryl nodded, understanding the significance of this voluntary information. "Nursing is a noble profession, demanding too." "I was good at it," Sarah said, a flicker of pride crossing her face. "Top of my class, actually." She adjusted Emma, who had begun to fuss. The movement revealed chapped hands with broken nails, hands that had clearly been working hard despite their circumstances. "How long have you been—" Meryl let the question hang delicately. "Living in my car," Sarah finished bluntly. 3 months. Before that we had a room in a shared house, but the landlord raised the rent without warning. Before that—" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." But it did matter, Meryl thought. Every step of Sarah's journey mattered. "I have 3 daughters," Meryl said after a moment. "My youngest is close to your age now. When she was a baby, I was filming in a remote location. The accommodations were terrible, the weather was worse, and she got sick." She paused, remembering. "I've never felt so helpless, so terrified, and I had resources, support. I can't imagine facing that alone." Sarah looked at her then, really looked at her, something shifting in her expression. "You don't forget that feeling, do you? The fear when they're sick?" "Never," Meryl agreed softly. As they talked, clouds gathered overhead. A fine mist began to fall, then heavier drops. Sarah immediately moved to shield Emma. "My hotel is 2 blocks away," Meryl said, gathering their trash. "A warm shower, a comfortable place for Emma to nap, just for a few hours until the rain passes." Sarah hesitated, years of necessary caution warring with immediate need. "No strings," Meryl added quietly. "You can leave any time you want." A particularly heavy raindrop landed on Emma's cheek, making her whimper. Sarah made her decision. "Just until the rain stops," she conceded. As they walked to Sarah's car to collect what she needed, Meryl maintained a respectful distance. She watched as Sarah carefully packed a small bag, her movements efficient, practiced, the routine of someone used to having to leave quickly. When Sarah finally locked her car and turned to Meryl, with Emma bundled against the rain, her chin was raised with a dignity that transcended her circumstances. "We're ready," she said. Neither woman knew it then, but this tentative step toward trust would be the foundation of something neither could have anticipated. The rain fell harder as they walked side by side, an unlikely pair connected by the most fundamental human bond, the understanding that sometimes we all need someone to see us at our most vulnerable. The hotel's suite door swung open, and Sarah paused at the threshold. Emma clutched protectively against her chest. Her eyes widened as she took in the spacious room with its pristine furnishings, plush carpet, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston's rain-blurred skyline. "Please come in," Meryl said gently, stepping aside to give Sarah space. "Make yourself comfortable." Sarah entered cautiously, as if afraid her mere presence might somehow soil the luxury around her. She remained standing in the center of the room, looking painfully out of place in her worn jeans and faded sweatshirt, her unwashed hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "The bathroom is through there," Meryl pointed to a door on the right. "There are fresh towels, shampoo, everything you might need." Sarah nodded but didn't move, her body language betraying her discomfort. Emma began to fuss, making small whimpering sounds against her mother's shoulder. "Would you like me to order some food while you freshen up?" Meryl offered, keeping her tone casual, as if hosting a homeless mother and baby in her hotel suite were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm not really hungry," Sarah said, though the lie was transparent. "But Emma needs to eat soon." "I can warm her formula while you take a shower," Meryl suggested. When she saw Sarah's hesitation, she added, "Or I can give you privacy if you'd prefer to do it yourself." Sarah looked down at Emma, then at her own rumpled clothes. The longing for a hot shower was evident in her expression, battling with her reluctance to let Emma out of her sight. "I haven't had a real shower in weeks," she admitted quietly, the confession costing her visible effort. "Just quick washes in public restrooms when I could." "All the more reason to enjoy one now," Meryl said, her voice free of judgment. "I promise. Emma will be safe with me. The door has a lock if you want to check on her any time." Something in Meryl's steady gaze must have reassured Sarah, because she finally nodded. "Okay," she said, passing Emma to Meryl with obvious reluctance. "Her formula is in the bag. 2 scoops in warm water." "I remember the drill," Meryl said with a gentle smile, cradling Emma with the practiced ease of a mother. "Take your time. There's no rush." When the bathroom door closed, Meryl looked down at the baby in her arms. Emma's wide eyes studied her, face with innocent curiosity. "Hello there," Meryl whispered, noting the baby's pallor and slightly labored breathing. Up close, she could see that Emma was underweight, her cheeks not quite as round as they should be at her age, as she prepared the formula with one hand, expertly balancing Emma in the crook of her arm. Meryl heard the shower start. She imagined how it must feel for Sarah. That first rush of hot water after so long without such a basic comfort. Emma took the bottle eagerly, her tiny hands coming up to rest against the plastic. Meryl sat in an armchair by the window, watching the rain while the baby fed. She noticed how Emma's eyelids drooped with each swallow, how her tiny body gradually relaxed as hunger gave way to satisfaction. When Sarah emerged 40 minutes later, her hair was damp, her face pink from the steam. She wore the same clothes, but she looked transformed, the simple act of being clean having restored something essential in her. "Feel better?" Meryl asked quietly, still holding a now sleeping Emma. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling unexpectedly, with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." Meryl gestured to the room service tray that had arrived during Sarah's shower. "I ordered a few things. Please eat." This time, Sarah didn't refuse. She sat on the edge of the sofa and reached for a sandwich, eating with the controlled restraint of someone accustomed to making food last. When she finished, she looked at Emma, still sleeping peacefully in Meryl's arms. "She trusts you," Sarah observed. "Babies are good judges of character," Meryl replied with a small smile. "So are mothers." "Not always," Sarah said, her voice suddenly bitter. "I trusted the wrong people, made the wrong choices, and now Emma pays the price." The words hung between them, charged with a pain Meryl could sense went deep. She waited, giving Sarah space to continue if she chose to. "She's not well," Sarah said finally, her voice breaking. "I know she needs a doctor, but I'm afraid they'll see we're homeless, that they'll call child services and take her away from me." Her hands twisted in her lap. "She's all I have left." "May I ask what happened?" Meryl inquired softly. "You don't have to tell me, but sometimes sharing the burden helps." Sarah's gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window, her expression distant. "I was married," she began, her voice flat, as if the only way to tell her story was to drain it of emotion. "To David. He was in his last year of medical school, top of his class. We met in the hospital where I was doing my nursing clinicals." She paused, collecting herself. "We'd been married 8 months when I got pregnant with Emma. We were so happy, so ready to be parents." Her voice caught. "Then David collapsed one night while studying. Brain aneurysm. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived." Meryl closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of Sarah's loss. "I'm so sorry," she said, knowing the words were inadequate. 26 years old, Sarah continued, as if she hadn't heard. Brilliant future ahead of him, and then just gone. I was 5 months pregnant," She took a shuddering breath. His student loans came due immediately after his death. Our apartment was in his name, and the landlord wouldn't transfer the lease to me because I wasn't working full-time. I couldn't keep up with the rent on my savings. You had no family to help? Meryl asked gently. Sarah's laugh was hollow. My parents died when I was in high school. David's family. Her expression darkened. They blamed me for his death. Said, the stress of the pregnancy triggered the aneurysm. It was nonsense, medically impossible, but grief isn't rational. She wiped away a tear that had escaped. I had Emma in a shelter, found odd jobs when I could, but without childcare, without a permanent address. She gestured helplessly. The car was the last thing I had. When I couldn't afford a room anymore, it became our home. Emma stirred in Meryl's arms, making a small sound that immediately drew Sarah's attention. She rose and took her daughter, checking her with practiced hands. She's warm, Sarah said, worry clouding her expression. The cough is better, but she's still not right. Meryl made a decision then, watching this young mother who had endured so much, yet still fought so fiercely for her child. Sarah, she said, firmly, I want you to stay here in the suite for a few days. Sarah started to shake her head, but Meryl continued, not charity. Think of it as one mother helping another. Emma needs stability and warmth to recover. You need rest. This is just a temporary respite while we figure out next steps. We? Sarah asked, the word small and uncertain. Yes, we, Meryl said with quiet conviction. If you'll let me, I'd like to help you find your way forward, not by taking over, but by standing beside you. Sarah looked down at Emma, then around, at the safe, warm room, a stark contrast to the car that had been their home. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in a release of the constant tension she'd carried for so long. A few days, she agreed finally, her voice barely audible. Just until Emma's better. As Sarah settled on the couch with Emma cradled against her chest, Meryl watched them silently. The rain continued outside, but within the suite something had shifted. A fragile trust had formed, delicate as a soap bubble but real nonetheless. For the first time in months Sarah fell asleep without fear, her breathing deep and even. And Meryl, watching over them both, began to plan. Morning light filtered through the hotel curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. Meryl sat in the suite's small dining area, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed tones to avoid waking Sarah and Emma. The pair remained asleep on the bed, where Sarah had finally transferred after Meryl's gentle insistence the night before. The couch was comfortable enough for one night, Meryl had assured her. Yes, I understand the sensitivity, Meryl said into the phone, her voice low but determined. But this is urgent. A 4-month-old with respiratory issues and possible malnutrition. She listened, nodding. Today would be ideal. Yes, complete discretion is essential. She ended the call and immediately dialed another number, checking her watch. It was early, but not too early for what needed to be done. As she waited for an answer, Meryl watched Sarah stir slightly, instinctively reaching for Emma even in sleep, her arm curling protectively around the baby. "Catherine, it's Meryl," she said when the call connected. "I need your expertise. Yes, exactly like the shelter initiative we discussed. No, this is more immediate, more personal." By the time Sarah woke, Meryl had made a dozen calls and arranged the beginnings of what she hoped would be a sustainable path forward. She greeted Sarah with a fresh cup of coffee and a gentle smile. "Good morning," Meryl said, offering the steaming mug. "How are you feeling?" Sarah sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Emma. "Better," she admitted, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. "I can't remember the last time I slept so deeply." She glanced at Emma, who was still sleeping peacefully. She had a good night too, barely coughed at all. "I'm glad," Meryl said, sitting at the edge of the bed. "Sarah, I've made some calls this morning. I hope you don't mind." Wariness immediately returned to Sarah's expression. "What kind of calls?" "First, a pediatrician, a friend of mine who's very discreet. She can come here to examine Emma today." When she saw Sarah tense, Meryl quickly added, "She won't report anything unless Emma is in immediate danger, which she clearly isn't. You're taking care of her the best you can under impossible circumstances. Sarah's grip on the coffee mug tightened. "And the other calls?" "To some contacts who can help with housing and job placement," Meryl said carefully. "No commitments, just exploring options. Everything stays your decision." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked, looking up to meet Meryl's gaze. "You don't know me, you don't owe me anything." Meryl considered her answer carefully. "Because I can," she said simply. "Because the world is full of people who look away, and sometimes what's needed is someone who looks closer instead." She paused. "And because 20 years ago I played a character who lost everything and had to rebuild her life. I researched the role, spent time with women in shelters, heard their stories, but it wasn't real for me, not like it is for you." She leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about guilt or obligation, Sarah. It's about connection, human to human." Emma chose that moment to wake, her small sounds drawing Sarah's immediate attention. As Sarah lifted her daughter, checking her diaper and murmuring soft words of comfort, Meryl saw again the fierce competence that coexisted with Sarah's vulnerability. "The pediatrician can be here at 11, Meryl said, "and room service can bring breakfast whenever you're ready. But first I thought you might appreciate some clean clothes." She gestured to a garment bag hanging on the closet door. "My assistant brought some options from wardrobe, all new, tags still on, for both you and Emma." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "I can't accept." "They were going to be donated anyway," Meryl interjected gently, though it wasn't entirely true. "Production always overbuys. Consider it recycling." After breakfast, with Emma fed and dressed in a soft new onesie, the atmosphere in the suite had lightened. Sarah wore simple jeans and a sweater from the selection Meryl had provided, practical. Clothes that fit her well and, more importantly, were clean and unworthy. Meryl noticed how Sarah stood straighter in them, how she caught glimpses of herself in the mirror when she thought no one was looking. At precisely 11, there was a discreet knock at the door. Dr. Helena Chen entered with a warm smile and a small medical bag, her manner professional but kind. She greeted Sarah without a hint of judgment, focusing immediately on Emma. "Let's have a look at this little one," she said, setting up her examination area on the coffee table. Sarah hovered anxiously as Dr. Chen examined Emma thoroughly. Meryl stayed in the background, present but unobtrusive, allowing Sarah the space to interact with the doctor directly. "She has an ear infection," Dr. Chen confirmed, putting away her otoscope, "and some bronchial inflammation, though not severe. She's also slightly underweight for her age." She looked at Sarah. "You've been doing an incredible job under the circumstances. Many babies would be in much worse condition." The validation brought tears to Sarah's eyes that she quickly blinked away. "What does she need?" "Antibiotics for the ear infection, which I've brought with me," Dr. Chen said, removing medication from her bag. "Regular feedings with formula fortified with extra calories, warm, clean environments, and consistent medical follow-up, which I'm happy to provide." After explaining the medication schedule and addressing Sarah's questions, Dr. Chen packed up her equipment. Before leaving, she handed Sarah a card. "Call me any time, day or night, if you have concerns. Emma is going to be fine with proper care, which I can see she has in her mother." When the doctor had gone, Sarah sat heavily on the couch, Emma cradled in her arms, the prescribed medication beside her. "Thank you," she said to Meryl, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been so worried about her." "I know," Meryl said simply. Sarah administered the first dose of medicine to Emma, her hands steady despite her emotions. As she settled the baby against her shoulder, she looked at Meryl with new determination. "You mentioned housing options," she said. "I want to hear them. I won't live in this hotel forever. I need to start rebuilding, for both of us." Meryl nodded, respect evident in her expression. "There's a women's transitional housing program that has an opening. Private room, shared facilities, on-site childcare during job interviews or shifts. It's not luxurious, but it's safe, warm, and comes with support services. How soon could we move in?" "Tomorrow, if you want. I've spoken with the director, Catherine. She's holding the space." Sarah took a deep breath. "And jobs. I need to work. I need to support Emma myself." There are a few possibilities, Meryl said, but first let's focus on getting you both healthy and settled, one step at a time. As they discussed details, Meryl observed the subtle transformation in Sarah. With each piece of concrete help, each practical solution, she seemed to grow more present, more engaged. The paralysis of crisis was giving way to the momentum of action. Later, as Sarah put Emma down for a nap in the makeshift crib they'd created from pillows and blankets, she turned to Meryl with a question that revealed how far they'd come in such a short time. "Why did you stop that night in the parking lot? You could have just walked by like everyone else." Meryl considered the question. "Because sometimes the most important things we do in life are the things no one else sees, the moments when we choose to be fully human." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding something profound in Meryl's answer. "Thank you," she said again. But this time the words carried more than gratitude. They carried recognition. Recognition of being truly seen, perhaps for the first time since David's death. "Tomorrow," Sarah said with newfound resolve, "we start rebuilding." 2 weeks had passed since Sarah and Emma moved into Horizon House, the women's transitional housing facility that Catherine managed. Their small room was modest: a single bed, a crib that had been donated, a dresser, and a small desk beneath. A window that overlooked a community garden. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and theirs, at least for now. Sarah had pinned a calendar to the wall, each day marked with notes and reminders. Today's square was circled in bold red. Interview, medical office assistant, 2 p.m. It was her third interview since arriving at Horizon House, the previous. 2 having ended with polite rejections that did little to mask the underlying hesitations about hiring a single mother with inconsistent employment history. Standing before the small mirror above the dresser, Sarah adjusted her collar, smoothing down the simple blouse Meryl had included among the clothes she'd given her. Emma watched from her crib, babbling contentedly, her health visibly improved, after 2 weeks of regular meals, medicine, and stability. "What do you think, Em?" Sarah asked, turning to her daughter with a forced smile. "Does Mommy look like someone who deserves a chance?" Emma responded with a happy gurgle, waving her tiny fists in the air. Sarah leaned down to kiss her forehead, breathing in the clean baby scent that still seemed miraculous after their time in the car. "I'll take that as a yes." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Catherine stood in the doorway, her expression sympathetic. "Your ride's here, Sarah. Mrs. Coleman from the 3rd floor will watch Emma, as arranged." "Thank you," Sarah said, gathering her folder containing her resume, sparse as it was, and references from nursing school instructors she'd managed to contact. "I should be back by 4 at the latest." 2 hours later, Sarah sat on a bench 3 blocks from the medical office, staring blankly at the traffic passing by. The interview had been a disaster from the start. The office manager had frowned at the gap in her employment, questioned her ability to commit to a schedule with a baby, and seemed distinctly unimpressed by her partial nursing education. The final blow had been the request for reliable transportation. "Wampo B. Transit in that area is inconsistent at best," the manager had said, not unkindly but firmly. "We need someone who can guarantee they'll be here on time for the early morning shift." Sarah had tried to explain that she had a car, omitting that it was currently parked in a long-term lot with transmission problems she couldn't afford to fix. By the time she left, it was clear there would be no job offer. Now sitting in the spring sunshine that felt at odds with her darkening mood, Sarah felt the familiar weight of hopelessness pressing down. Her phone buzzed with a text from Meryl, who had checked in daily since Sarah moved to Horizon House. "How did the interview go?" Sarah stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Meryl had done so much already. Arranged the housing, paid for Emma's medication, even established a small emergency fund that Sarah had reluctantly accepted. Admitting another failure felt like confirming she wasn't worth the investment. Before she could reply, her phone rang. The mechanic she'd spoken to about her car. "Ms. Mitchell, I took another look at your sedan. It's worse than we thought. The transmission's shot, and there's significant rust damage to the undercarriage. Honestly, the repairs would cost more than the car's worth." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting the tears threatening to spill. "I see. Thank you for checking. If..." You want I can offer you $300 for parts, but that's about the best I can do. After ending the call, Sarah sat motionless, the final piece of her former life now officially beyond salvaging. The car had been more than transportation. It had been their shelter, their safe place, their last connection to the time before. Everything fell apart. Now it was just another loss to add to the growing list. She typed a reply to Meryl. Interview didn't go well, heading back to Horizon now. When Sarah returned to the facility, she was surprised to find Meryl waiting in the common room, engaged in animated conversation with Catherine. Both women looked up as she entered, their expressions shifting subtly as they registered her dejected demeanor. "Sarah," Meryl said, rising to greet her. "Catherine was just showing me some of the programs they're developing here," Sarah managed. A weak smile aware of Emma waiting upstairs, the one bright spot in her increasingly complicated existence. "That's great. I should go check on Emma." "I'll come with you," Meryl said, exchanging a glance with Catherine before following Sarah up the stairs. In the small room, Sarah found Emma happily playing with Mrs. Coleman, who departed with a sympathetic pat on Sarah's arm. Once they were alone, Sarah lifted Emma from her playmat, holding her close as if drawing strength from her daughter's innocent joy. "They didn't want me," Sarah said flatly, not looking at Meryl. "Too many gaps in my work history. No reliable transportation. Too many responsibilities." Her voice took on a bitter edge. "Basically, too much baggage." Meryl sat on the edge of the bed, giving Sarah space. "I'm sorry the interview didn't go well. That's frustrating." "Frustrating?" Sarah's laugh held no humor. "My car is officially dead. The mechanic offered me $300 for parts, which won't get me another vehicle. Without a car, I can't get to most jobs. Without a job, I can't afford a place for Emma and me. When our time here is up," she shook her head, the despair overwhelming, "I'm right back where I started." "That's not true," Meryl said firmly. "You have safe housing. Emma is healthy. You have support now." "Charity, you mean?" Sarah snapped, immediately regretting her tone but unable to stop the words pouring out. "I appreciate everything you've done, Meryl, more than I can express. But I need to stand on my own. I need to be the mother Emma deserves, not some project for a famous actress to feel good about helping." The room fell silent except for Emma's soft babbling. Sarah closed her eyes, mortified by her outburst. "Is that what you think this is?" Meryl asked quietly. "No," Sarah admitted, sinking onto the desk chair. "I'm sorry. That was unfair. I feel like I'm drowning again. Like every step forward comes with 2 steps back." Meryl considered her next words carefully. "I have a proposal," she said. "A comprehensive plan to help you get back on your feet. Not charity. An investment. In your future and Emma's." Sarah looked up, wariness mingling with the faintest flicker of hope in her eyes. "What kind of plan?" "Financial support to complete your nursing degree, stable housing while you study, quality childcare for Emma." Meryl held up a hand as Sarah started to protest. "Before you say no, hear me out. This isn't a handout. It's a pathway to self-sufficiency, the very thing you're fighting for." Sarah stared at Meryl, her expression unreadable. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." "I know enough," Meryl replied simply. "I know you're intelligent, determined, and would be an excellent nurse. I know Emma deserves a mother who can fulfill her potential. And I know that sometimes the difference between sinking and swimming is having someone who believes in you when you can't believe in yourself." Emma reached for Sarah's face, her tiny fingers patting her mother's cheek as if sensing her turmoil. Sarah caught the small hand, pressing a kiss to Emma's palm. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Meryl nodded, respecting the boundary. "Of course, take all the time you need." As Meryl rose to leave, Sarah spoke again, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "Thank you, not just for the offer, but for not giving up on us. That was never an option," Meryl said with a gentle smile. "Some stories aren't meant to end in the middle, Sarah. Yours is just beginning." After Meryl left, Sarah stood by the window, watching as the acclaimed actress crossed the garden below. Emma rested against her shoulder, secure in her mother's arms, unaware of the crossroads they faced. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. A future where she could give Emma not just the necessities, but opportunities. A future where she could reclaim her own dreams while creating new ones for her daughter. "What do you think, Em?" she whispered. "Should we take a chance?" Emma's only answer was to nestle closer, but for Sarah it was enough. 3 days after Meryl's proposal, Sarah sat on a bench in the community garden behind Horizon House. Emma was napping upstairs under Mrs. Coleman's watchful eye, giving Sarah a rare moment alone with her thoughts. She'd been turning Meryl's offer over in her mind, examining it from every angle, searching for the catch or the strings that must surely be attached. The spring air carried the scent of newly turned soil and budding flowers, a fitting backdrop for thoughts of growth and renewal. Sarah absently traced the outline of her phone in her pocket, where Meryl's number waited. She'd sent a simple text that morning. "I'd like to talk about your offer. When are you free?" The response had been immediate. "I'll come to you, 2 p.m. Now, watching the hands of her watch approach the appointed hour, Sarah rehearsed what she would say. Her pride warred with practicality, her independence with Emma's needs. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Meryl walked through the garden gate, dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Despite her efforts to blend in, her presence drew glances from the few residents enjoying the afternoon sunshine. She spotted Sarah and smiled, making her way to the bench. "This is lovely," Meryl said, taking in the garden with genuine appreciation. "A little oasis." Sarah nodded, making room on the bench. "The residents maintain it. I've been helping with the vegetable beds." She gestured to a patch of freshly planted seedlings. "Emma likes to watch from her blanket. I think she's fascinated by the colors." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the tension of their last conversation softened by time and reflection. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Emma's fever broke completely yesterday. Dr. Chen says she's gaining weight right on schedule now." She turned to face Meryl directly. "I want you to know that whatever I decide about your offer, I'll never forget what you've already done for us. You saved us, literally." Meryl shook her head gently. "You were saving yourselves long before I came along, Sarah. You kept Emma alive and loved under impossible circumstances. That strength comes from you, not me." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, feeling seen in a way that had become rare since David's death. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said, gathering her courage. "I have some questions and conditions." "I'd expect nothing less," Meryl replied, her expression open. "Ask me anything. If, and I'm still saying if, I accept your help with nursing school, I want to work part-time while studying. I need to contribute something." Sarah's voice was firm. "And I want to establish a repayment plan even if it takes years." Instead of arguing, Meryl simply nodded. "That seems reasonable. What else?" Surprised by the easy agreement, Sarah continued, with more confidence. "I'd need to understand exactly what you're offering and what you'd expect in return, not just vague promises, but something concrete we both understand." "Of course," Meryl said. "I've actually prepared something." She removed a folder from her bag and handed it to Sarah. "Take your time looking it over." Inside, Sarah found detailed outlines for educational funding, housing assistance, and childcare arrangements. The documents were comprehensive yet simple, stating clearly what would be provided and for how long. The final page was titled Conditions, but to Sarah's surprise, there were only 2 listed: that she maintain passing grades and that she meet monthly with a financial counselor to develop budgeting skills. "This is thorough," Sarah said, scanning the pages again. "But it doesn't say what you get out of this arrangement." Meryl smiled. "What I get is the satisfaction of helping someone who deserves a chance. The satisfaction of knowing Emma will grow up with opportunities she might otherwise have missed." She paused, considering something. "Look, Sarah, I know it's hard to accept help of this magnitude. It feels unbalanced, uncomfortable." "It feels like I'm failing," Sarah admitted quietly. "Like I can't provide for my own child without a handout." "That's not what this is," Meryl said firmly. "Think of it as an investment in your future, an investment someone should have made long ago." She leaned forward slightly. Do you know how many talented people never reach their potential because of one bad break, one tragedy that derails everything? Sarah thought of David, of the future. They'd planned, now forever unreachable. Yes, she said simply, I do. Then understand that this isn't charity. It's course correction. It's saying that one terrible event shouldn't determine the rest of your life, or Emma's. Sarah sat with those words, feeling their truth resonating with something deep inside her. She looked past Meryl to the garden, where residents were nurturing plants that would eventually bear fruit, given the right conditions to thrive. I've spent so long just surviving, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. The idea of actually building a future feels almost frightening. That's normal, Meryl assured her. But consider this. You've already survived the worst day of your life. You've lived through what would break many people. Nursing school will be challenging, but compared to what you've already endured, you're more than capable. Sarah looked down at the folder again, at the concrete pathway it represented. She thought of Emma, of the life she wanted to give her daughter, of the mother she wanted to be. She thought of David, who had believed in her abilities even when she doubted herself. There's one more condition, Sarah said, meeting Meryl's gaze steadily. When I'm established, when I'm on my feet and working as a nurse, I want to help someone else, the way you're helping me. Meryl smiled, genuine warmth lighting her eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. So we have a deal? Sarah asked, extending her hand. We have a deal, Meryl confirmed, clasping Sarah's hand firmly. As they shook on their agreement, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a weight lifting, not because someone else was carrying her burden, but because she could finally see a path forward, a path that honored David's memory, secured Emma's future, and reclaimed her own dreams. Later that evening, as Sarah bathed Emma in the small tub they shared with another resident, she found herself humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Emma splashed happily, her eyes bright with health and security, too young to understand how much had changed in these few short weeks. We're going to be okay, Em, Sarah whispered, washing her daughter's dark curls. Better than okay. For the first time since that terrible night when the police had knocked on her door, Sarah believed those words completely. The future stretched before them, uncertain still but full of possibilities that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Across town, Meryl sat in her hotel suite, finalizing arrangements with her financial advisor. When she hung up, she stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She thought of Sarah and Emma, of the strength she'd witnessed, of the resilience that deserved support rather than obstacles. She thought of her own daughters, of the safety nets they'd always had, the opportunities they'd taken for granted. Sometimes, she murmured to herself, the most important roles we play are the ones no one ever sees on screen. 3 months passed in a flurry of activity and adjustment. Summer settled over Boston, bringing with it humid days and warm nights that blurred. Into a rhythm of new routines and cautious optimism, Sarah now lived with Emma in a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment near the community college, where she had enrolled in nursing classes to complete her degree. The apartment, modest but clean, sat on the second floor of a well-maintained building with a small playground visible from their living room window. Photos of Emma now decorated the refrigerator, marking her growth over the months, tangible evidence of progress and stability. A second-hand desk occupied one corner, stacked with textbooks and neatly organized notes, a far cry from the desperate disarray that had characterized their life in the car. Sarah placed Emma in her high chair, smiling as her daughter eagerly reached for the pieces of banana on the tray. At 8 months old, Emma was thriving, her cheeks round and healthy, her developmental milestones back on track. The regular doctor visits confirmed what Sarah could see in her daughter's bright eyes and ready smile. Emma was flourishing in their new environment. Careful, little miss, Sarah cautioned, as Emma squished a banana chunk in her enthusiastic grip. We've got to clean you up before Miss Patty arrives. As if on cue, there was a gentle knock at the door. Sarah wiped her hands and went to answer it, greeting the elderly woman who lived next door and had become Emma's regular babysitter during Sarah's morning classes. "There's my sweet girl," Patty exclaimed, beaming at Emma, who responded with a delighted squeal. "And how's our nursing student today?" "Ready for my microbiology exam?" Sarah replied, gathering her backpack. "I was up until midnight studying, but I think I've got it." "You'll do wonderfully," Patty assured her, settling into what had become her regular chair. "Just like you did on the anatomy test." Sarah smiled, remembering the A she had earned, the first tangible validation of her academic abilities since returning to school. "Thanks, Patty. I'll be back by 1. As Sarah walked the 6 blocks to campus, she mentally reviewed microbiology terms, her stride purposeful. The summer session was intense, cramming semester-long courses into 8-week blocks, but she was determined to make up for lost time. The campus came into view, still slightly surreal to her. This normal everyday world of students rushing to class had once seemed as distant as another planet during those dark days in the car. Later that afternoon, after her exam and a quick study session in the library, Sarah returned home to find Meryl seated on the floor with Emma, helping her stack colorful blocks that inevitably tumbled down to Emma's squealing delight. "Meryl!" Sarah exclaimed, setting down her backpack. "I didn't know you were back in Boston." Meryl looked up with a smile, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Just for 2 days. Wrapped the Boston scenes yesterday." She stood, brushing off her jeans. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. Patty let me in before she had to. Leave for her doctor's appointment." "Of course not," Sarah said, kneeling to kiss Emma's head. "How'd you do, sweet pea? Were you good for Miss Patty and Meryl?" "She's remarkable," Meryl said, watching the interaction with genuine warmth. "She's grown so much since I saw her last month," Sarah nodded, still sometimes amazed by the transformation herself. "Dr. Chen says she's right on track now." She looked up at Meryl. "How long can you stay? I was just going to make a simple dinner, but I could—" "Please don't change anything on my account," Meryl interrupted gently. "Actually, I brought dinner." She gestured to several containers on the kitchen counter. "From that Italian place you mentioned liking." As they ate dinner, Sarah shared details about her classes, her voice animated as she described a particularly engaging clinical demonstration. Meryl listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her genuine interest in Sarah's progress. "I've made friends with 2 other mothers in my program," Sarah said, helping Emma with a small piece of pasta. "We've started studying together twice a week. They both have children a little older than Emma, so sometimes we rotate hosting. It helps to be around people who understand the balancing act." "That's wonderful," Meryl said sincerely. "Community makes such a difference," Sarah nodded, thinking of how her world had expanded beyond mere survival. "The housing manager mentioned something interesting yesterday," she said, changing the subject. "Apparently someone recognized me from seeing us together outside the building last month. Asked if I was, what did she call it? Meryl Streep's charity case." A shadow crossed Meryl's face. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. That's exactly what I wanted to avoid." "It's okay," Sarah said, surprising herself with how little the comment had bothered her. "A month ago it would have devastated me. Now?" She shrugged. "People will think what they want to think. We know the truth." Meryl studied her for a moment, noting the new confidence in Sarah's posture, the clarity in her eyes. "Still, your privacy matters. I should have been more careful." "Actually," Sarah said with a small smile, "it made me realize something important. When David died, I felt so visible in my grief, yet completely unseen as a person. Then when I became homeless, I was invisible in a different way. People literally looked through me like I didn't exist." She gathered Emma's discarded spoon. "Now I'm being seen again, even if it's for the wrong reasons, but this time I know who I am, regardless of who's looking." The evening deepened around them as they cleared away dinner and moved to the small living area. Emma played on her activity mat while the women talked, their conversation flowing easily between serious topics and lighter moments. When Emma began to fuss, signaling her bedtime, Sarah excused herself to begin their nighttime routine. Meryl waited in the living room, noting the small touches that had transformed the apartment into a home. Emma's artwork taped to the refrigerator, well-worn textbooks beside a cup of pens on the desk, a small vase of wildflowers on the windowsill. These weren't extravagant details, but they represented something precious: stability, security, normalcy. When Sarah returned, she found Meryl examining the calendar hanging beside the desk, filled with carefully noted assignments, appointments, and work shifts at the campus coffee shop where Sarah had secured a part-time position. "She went down easily," Sarah said. "I think you wore her out with all those block towers." Meryl smiled, turning from the calendar. "You've created a good life here, Sarah." "We're getting there," Sarah agreed, sinking onto the couch. "Some days are harder than others. The program is demanding and balancing everything." She shook her head slightly. "But every time I think about giving up, I remember where we were 3 months ago." "You won't give up," Meryl said with certainty. "It's not in your nature." Sarah nodded, accepting the truth in those words. "Before you go, there's something I want to show you." She crossed to the desk and removed an envelope from the drawer. "My first paycheck from the coffee shop," she explained, handing it to Meryl. "I've endorsed it to the foundation you set up. It's not much, but it's a start." Meryl looked at the check, then back at Sarah, understanding the significance of the gesture. "You don't need to do this yet. The agreement was—" "I know what the agreement was," Sarah interrupted gently. "This is what I need to do. For me." As Meryl prepared to leave, promising to visit again when her schedule permitted, Sarah walked her to the door. "Thank you," she said simply, embracing Meryl with genuine affection. "Not just for the financial help, but for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Meryl returned the embrace, reminded again of why she had been drawn to help this remarkable young woman. "You're doing the hard part, Sarah. I'm just watching from the sidelines." After Meryl left, Sarah stood at the window, watching her walk to the waiting car. From victim to survivor to student to mother, building a future. Each role had shaped her, strengthened her. The road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time in a very long time, Sarah faced them not with fear, but with determination. In the quiet apartment, with Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, Sarah allowed herself to acknowledge a truth that had been forming gradually over these months. Sometimes, accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. And sometimes the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from allowing others to stand beside you. Sarah stood at her mailbox, sorting through the usual assortment of bills and advertisements, when an envelope with unfamiliar handwriting caught her attention. Her breath caught as she recognized the return address, Westford, Massachusetts, David's hometown. The envelope bore the names Gregory and Eleanor Mitchell, her late husband's parents. With trembling fingers, Sarah tucked the letter into her pocket, unable to open it on the spot. She collected Emma from the building's childcare center, where she spent a few hours each day while Sarah attended classes, and returned to their apartment, the letter burning like a hot coal against her hip. Once Emma was settled with her toys, in the living room, Sarah finally allowed herself to study the envelope. She hadn't heard from David's parents since the funeral, when they had made their accusations about her responsibility for their son's death. In the aftermath of her own grief, their rejection had been a wound she'd struggled to understand, let alone forgive. Taking a deep breath, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Sarah," it began in Eleanor's precise handwriting. "We have recently learned of your whereabouts through a mutual acquaintance at Boston Memorial Hospital. We understand you are pursuing your nursing degree again, and that our granddaughter Emma is with you. We would like very much to meet with you, if you are willing, to discuss establishing a relationship with Emma." Sarah's hands shook as she read the rest of the letter, its careful phrasing, its tentative overtures, its unspoken acknowledgement of past wrongs. They had enclosed a photo of David as a child, standing between his parents on a beach, his smile eerily similar to Emma's. The letter concluded, "We understand if you're not ready to hear from us. We've caused you pain during a time when you deserved only support. We hope someday you might allow us to know our son's child, and perhaps find a way forward together." Sarah set the letter down, emotions swirling through her. Anger, confusion, fear, and buried beneath it all a question she couldn't ignore. Did Emma deserve to know her father's family despite the past? Without thinking, she reached for her phone and called the one person whose judgment she trusted implicitly. "Meryl?" Sarah's voice was tight with emotion. "I'm sorry to bother you, but something's happened." 20 minutes later, her phone rang. Meryl had excused herself from a production meeting to return Sarah's call. As Sarah explained about the letter, she paced the small apartment, keeping one eye on Emma, who was contentedly stacking blocks on the floor. "They rejected me completely after his death," Sarah said, the old hurt rising in her voice. "Blamed me for the aneurysm, if you can believe that. I was 5 months pregnant, devastated, and they—" She stopped, fighting to control her emotions. "Now they want to see Emma, be grandparents after everything." "Have you thought about what you want to do?" Meryl asked, her voice steady and calm. "My first instinct was to throw the letter away," Sarah admitted. "But then I looked at Emma and realized this isn't just about me. David would have wanted her to know his parents." She paused. "I just don't know if I can face them. What if they try to take her from me again?" "Again?" Meryl's voice sharpened with concern. Sarah sighed, realizing there were parts of her story she hadn't shared. "Before I left for another state, they were talking about filing for custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable after David's death. That's part of why I left. I was afraid of losing her when I'd already lost everything else." "I see," Meryl said thoughtfully. "That context makes your hesitation understandable. But running away didn't solve anything," Sarah said, surprising herself with the insight. "I've been hiding in some ways even after we got out of the car. Maybe it's time to stop running. What does that look like for you?" Meryl asked. Sarah watched Emma babble happily to her stuffed elephant, David's eyes unmistakable in her little face. I think I need to meet with them, on my terms, in a public place, with clear boundaries." "That sounds wise," Meryl agreed. "Would you like me to be there with you?" The offer touched Sarah deeply. "Thank you, but I think this is something I need to do myself. To show them, and maybe myself, that I'm not the desperate, broken woman they last saw." "I understand," Meryl said. "But I'm here if you need anything, advice, support, or just someone to listen." After ending the call, Sarah sat beside Emma on the floor, gently stroking her daughter's soft curls. "What do you think, Em? Should we meet your grandparents?" Emma looked up and offered her block, a gesture of simple trust that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. That evening, Sarah composed a careful reply to the Mitchells, suggesting they meet at a cafe near the college campus the following Saturday. She set clear parameters, a 1-hour meeting in a public place with the understanding that this was a first step only, with no promises beyond that. When Saturday arrived, Sarah dressed Emma in a pretty yellow dress that highlighted her dark curls and expressive eyes. She chose her own outfit carefully, a simple blue dress that conveyed both professionalism and confidence. As they waited at the cafe, Sarah's heart pounded with nervous anticipation. She recognized the Mitchells immediately as they entered. Gregory's hair had grayed considerably, and Eleanor had lost weight. But they carried themselves with the same reserved dignity she remembered. They approached the table slowly, their eyes fixed on Emma, who sat on Sarah's lap, playing with a wooden spoon. "Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion, "thank you for agreeing to meet us." "This is Emma," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "Emma, these are your daddy's parents." The next hour passed in a blur of cautious conversation. The Mitchells showed appropriate restraint, asking permission before touching Emma, respecting Sarah's boundaries. Gregory produced a small photo album of David as a child, which they paged through together, Sarah pointing out similarities between father and daughter. "She has his eyes," Eleanor said softly, "and his curious nature." "Yes," Sarah agreed, feeling an unexpected connection in their shared recognition of David in his daughter. Toward the end of the hour, Gregory cleared his throat. "Sarah, we owe you an apology. A profound one, the things we said after David died, sir." His voice broke. "We were shattered by grief and looking for somewhere to place blame. It was unfair and cruel, especially when you were carrying our grandchild. We've had a lot of time to reflect," Eleanor added, her composure slipping slightly. To regret our actions. When we heard you were living in your car, she stopped, visibly distressed. The thought that our granddaughter, David's child, was homeless while we had a home that stood empty. That wasn't your responsibility, Sarah said, surprising herself with the lack of bitterness in her voice. I made choices too. I could have reached out, but pride and fear kept me from it. We're hoping, Gregory said carefully, that perhaps we might build some kind of relationship with Emma, and with you if that's something you'd consider. Sarah studied them, searching for ulterior motives, and finding instead two aging people, marked by loss and regret, reaching for connection to the only part of their son that remained. We can start slowly, she said finally. Perhaps monthly visits here in Boston. I want Emma to know her father's family, but I also need to protect her, and myself. Relief flooded their faces. That would be more than we hoped for, Eleanor said. As they prepared to leave, Gregory hesitated, then placed an envelope on the table. This isn't meant to overstep, he said quickly. But there was a savings account David had been building for his children's education. We'd like Emma to have it as he intended. Sarah looked at the envelope, then back at them. Thank you, she said simply. David would want that for her. After the Mitchells left, Sarah remained at the table, Emma contentedly playing in her lap. The meeting had gone better than she'd dared hope, yet complex emotions lingered. There was a long road ahead to true trust and understanding, but the first step had been taken. That evening she called Meryl to share how the meeting had gone. You should be proud of yourself, Meryl said warmly. That took tremendous courage. It wasn't about courage, Sarah replied, watching Emma sleep in her crib. It was about giving Emma what she deserves, her whole family, complicated as it might be. She paused. I realized something today. For the first time since David died, I'm making decisions based on what I want for our future, not just reacting to what I fear. That, Meryl said softly, is the difference between surviving and living. As Sarah ended the call, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. The boundaries she'd established weren't walls to keep others out, but the foundation of something new being built, a life defined not by what she had lost but by what she was creating. 1 year had passed since that rainy night, when Meryl Streep had first noticed the young woman and her baby living in a car. The seasons had completed their cycle. Spring had given way to summer, then fall, winter, and back to spring again, marking the passage of time in a way that seemed both swift and profound. Sarah stood before the mirror in her apartment, adjusting the navy blue blazer she'd carefully selected for today's occasion. Her nursing certification exam was in 2 hours, the culmination of 18 months of intense study, compressed into a single year through summer sessions and extra credits. Emma, now nearly 16 months old, watched from her play area, babbling happily as she stacked colorful rings on a wooden post. What do you think, Em? Sarah asked, smoothing her hair one last time. Does Mommy look like a nurse? Emma responded with an enthusiastic "Mama" that made Sarah smile. Her daughter's vocabulary grew daily, each new word a small miracle that Sarah documented in the journal she'd started keeping. The contrast between now and a year ago still struck her at unexpected moments. The security they now enjoyed, the future they were building, the community they had created. A knock at the door announced Patty's arrival. The elderly neighbor had become Emma's regular babysitter and something of a surrogate grandmother, her warm presence a constant in their lives. "Look at you," Patty exclaimed as Sarah opened the door. "The picture of professionalism." "I hope the exam committee thinks so," Sarah replied, gathering her bag. "All my notes are on the counter, and I've prepared lunch for Emma. I should be back by—" "Go," Patty interrupted gently. "We'll be just fine. You focus on acing that exam." Sarah knelt to kiss Emma goodbye, inhaling her sweet scent, drawing strength from the unconditional love in her daughter's eyes. "Wish me luck, sweet pea." As she walked to the bus stop, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message from Meryl. "You've got this. All your hard work has prepared you for today." The simple encouragement steadied her nerves. Their friendship had evolved over the past year, deepening beyond the initial helper and help dynamic into something more balanced. Sarah now saw Meryl not as a benefactor, but as a mentor and friend whose wisdom and perspective she valued deeply. Sarah arrived at the testing center early, taking a moment to center herself before entering. She thought of how far she had come, from the desperate young woman in a car to a student on the verge of certification, from someone merely surviving to someone thriving. The journey hadn't been without setbacks, difficult exams, moments of self-doubt, the complicated dance of rebuilding a relationship with David's parents. But each challenge had strengthened her resolve rather than weakening it. 3 hours later, Sarah emerged from the exam center, her mind still processing the complex scenarios and technical questions she'd navigated. She checked her phone to find messages from Patty, her study group friends and the Mitchells all wishing her well, and there was a voicemail from Meryl, who was filming in Europe but had called during her break. "Sarah, it's Meryl. I'm thinking of you today. Whatever the outcome of the exam, remember how far you've come. Call me when you can." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for this network of support that had seemed impossible just a year. As she walked home, she passed the community clinic where she'd completed her clinical hours. Through the window, she could see nurses moving efficiently between exam rooms, providing care and comfort to those who needed it most. Someday soon, she promised herself. When she arrived home, Sarah found not only Patty and Emma waiting for her, but a surprise visitor. Meryl stood in her living room, having apparently flown in specifically for this day. "Meryl!" Sarah exclaimed, shocked. "Aren't you supposed to be in Prague?" Meryl smiled, embracing her warmly. "We wrapped the scene early, and I had a few days before the next shoot. I wouldn't miss this milestone." Emma toddled over, arms outstretched, and Meryl scooped her up with practiced ease. The sight of them together, Emma comfortable and trusting, in Meryl's arms, was a poignant reminder of how their lives had intertwined. "How was the exam?" Meryl asked after Patty had tactfully excused herself. "Challenging," Sarah admitted, sinking onto the couch, "but I felt prepared. I'll know the results in 2 weeks." "I have no doubts," Meryl said, sitting beside her with Emma on her lap. "And I have news. The community clinic where you did your training has an opening for a newly certified nurse. The director was impressed with your work during your clinical rotation." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "How do you know that?" "I may have had lunch with Dr. Martinez last week," Meryl said with a small smile. "She mentioned they're specifically looking for someone with both technical skills and empathy, someone who understands what it means to navigate challenges in the healthcare system from both sides." The possibility sent a thrill of excitement through Sarah. The community clinic served many patients without insurance, including homeless individuals and families in transition, people whose circumstances she understood intimately. "That would be perfect," Sarah said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "I thought so too," Meryl agreed. "And there's something else." She reached into her bag and produced an envelope. "This arrived at my office." Sarah opened it to find a formal letter from Boston Memorial Hospital's charitable foundation, acknowledging receipt of her latest contribution and confirming the establishment of the David Mitchell Memorial Fund for nursing students facing hardship. "It's official," Meryl explained. "The foundation matched your contributions from the past year, and with the addition of the trust from David's parents, there's enough to provide a scholarship for 1 student annually." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she read the details. The fund would provide support for nursing students who had experienced homelessness or other significant hardships, a direct reflection of her own journey. "This is really happening," Sarah whispered. "David would be so proud." "Yes, he would," Meryl agreed softly. "Of the fund and of you." Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Meryl sat on the small balcony outside the apartment, watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky. The spring air carried the scent of new beginnings, of possibilities unfurling like the leaves on the trees lining the street below. "When you first approached my car that night," Sarah said reflectively, "I was terrified you'd call the authorities. That Emma would be taken from me." She shook her head at the memory. I couldn't imagine then that a year later we'd be sitting here with everything so transformed. You did the transforming, Meryl reminded her. I just provided some resources. You did the hard work. Sarah nodded, acknowledging the truth in that statement. Still, without that first step, without someone seeing us as people worthy of help rather than problems to be solved, I don't know where we'd be. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of quiet that exists between people who no longer need to fill every space with words. I have something for you, Meryl said finally, producing a small wrapped package. A little early graduation gift. Sarah unwrapped it carefully to find a sterling silver picture frame. Inside was a photo Meryl had taken a few months earlier. Sarah and Emma at the park, both laughing, their faces alight with joy and freedom. Engraved along the bottom edge were the words, "Every journey begins with a single step." It's perfect, Sarah said, tracing the engraving with her fingertip. Thank you, not just for this, but for everything. You're going to make an exceptional nurse, Meryl said, her voice warm with conviction. And Emma is going to grow up knowing what strength and resilience look like, because she sees them in her mother every day. As Meryl prepared to leave, Sarah walked her to the door. They embraced, no longer the celebrated actress and the homeless mother, but two women connected by shared purpose and mutual respect. How does it feel? Meryl asked, pausing at the threshold. Looking back on this year? Sarah considered the question, thinking of all the milestones, large and small, that had marked their journey. It feels like waking up, she said finally. Like I was sleepwalking through survival for so long, and now I'm fully awake and present in my own life. Meryl nodded, understanding reflected in her eyes. That's not just survival, Sarah, that's transformation. After Meryl left, Sarah returned to the balcony, the framed photo in her hands. She thought of the car that had been their home, of the parking lot where their lives had intersected with Meryl's, of the desperate prayers she had whispered to Emma on cold nights when hope seemed a luxury they couldn't afford. "We made it, Em," she whispered to the night air, a promise fulfilled and a future unfurling before them like an open road, illuminated by stars that had been there all along, even when obscured by clouds. 5 years had passed since that fateful, rainy night. The Boston skyline gleamed in the late afternoon sun as Sarah Mitchell, RN, completed her shift at the Community Health Alliance, where she now served as charge nurse for the Maternal Health Division. At 31, she carried herself with a quiet confidence, born of hard-won experience and professional accomplishment. "Heading out, Sarah?" Dr. Martinez asked, pausing at the nurse's station where Sarah was finishing her notes. "Big day tomorrow." Sarah smiled, nodding as she logged out of the system. "Emma's so excited she could barely focus on breakfast this morning. First day of kindergarten is apparently a very big deal when you're 5. "She'll do wonderfully," Dr. Martinez assured her. Smart as a whip, that one, just like her mother. Sarah gathered her bag, touched by the compliment. She'd worked hard to earn her position at the clinic, starting as a newly certified nurse, and gradually taking on more responsibility as her skills and confidence grew. The clinic served many of Boston's vulnerable populations, the homeless, the underinsured, those in transition, and Sarah's personal experience gave her an empathy and understanding that her colleagues recognized as invaluable. Outside, the late summer air was warm and sweet as Sarah walked to her car, a reliable, used sedan she'd purchased 3 years ago when her financial situation had stabilized. The vehicle represented more than transportation. It was a symbol of her independence, a tangible marker of how far she'd come. At home, Emma greeted her with an enthusiastic hug, her dark curls bouncing as she pulled Sarah toward the kitchen table where her backpack lay open, revealing neatly arranged school supplies. "I packed everything myself," Emma announced proudly. "Grandma Eleanor helped me check the list twice." Sarah smiled at Eleanor Mitchell, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Over the years, David's parents had become a consistent presence in their lives, the initial wariness gradually giving way to genuine affection. They now lived in a small apartment nearby, their relationship with their granddaughter flourishing. As they watched her grow, "She's been organizing everything all afternoon," Eleanor said, her eyes warm with love for her granddaughter. David was just the same way before his first day of school. The mention of David no longer brought pain, only a bittersweet acknowledgement of his absence and the ways in which he lived on in their daughter. Sarah had kept his memory alive for Emma through stories and photographs, creating a sense of connection to the father she had never known. After dinner and Emma's bedtime, Sarah sat at her desk reviewing applications for the David Mitchell Memorial Scholarship, now in its 4th year of supporting nursing students who had experienced homelessness or significant hardship. Each year, Sarah read the essays with a deep understanding of the struggles described, recognizing her own past journey in the words of these aspiring nurses. Her phone chimed with a text message from Meryl. Landed in Boston. Dinner tomorrow. After Emma's first day, would love to hear all about it, Sarah smiled, typing a quick reply. Meryl's career continued to flourish with awards and acclaim, but she still made time for regular visits and calls. Their friendship had evolved into something that transcended their initial roles, becoming a connection based on mutual respect and genuine care. Meryl had attended Sarah's graduation, Emma's birthday parties, and had even quietly supported the expansion of the clinic's maternal health services with a substantial donation. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Sarah helped Emma into her carefully chosen first-day outfit and took the obligatory photos by the front door. As they drove to the elementary school, Emma chatted excitedly about her teacher and new friends she hoped to make. Her confidence, a stark contrast to the fragile infant who had once slept in a car swaddled in mismatched blankets. After walking Emma to her classroom and assuring her that pickup would be at exactly 3:15, Sarah returned to her car, allowing herself a moment of reflection as other parents rushed to work or back home. This milestone, Emma starting school, was one she had once feared they might never reach, at least not together. On her way to the clinic, Sarah stopped at her favorite coffee shop, a small luxury she still appreciated after years of counting every penny. As she waited in line, she couldn't help noticing a young woman sitting alone in the corner, a sleeping infant bundled against her chest, her expression a familiar mixture of exhaustion and worry. Something about the woman's posture, the protective way she cradled her baby, stirred memories in Sarah. After ordering her coffee, she took a careful breath and approached the table. "Excuse me," Sarah said gently. "I hope this isn't intrusive, but is everything okay? Can I get you something to eat or drink?" The woman looked up, startled and immediately wary. "We're fine," she said quickly, her voice carrying the same defensive tone Sarah recognized from her own past. "I'm Sarah," she continued, undeterred. "I'm a nurse at the Community Health Alliance down the street. We have resources for new mothers if you're interested." She placed her business card on the table. No pressure, no questions asked. The woman hesitated, then took the card, studying it carefully. "Thank you," she said softly. I might come by." Sarah nodded, respecting the woman's space. "If you do, ask for me. And if not, that's okay too. The card has our emergency line as well, available 24/7. As Sarah walked away, she heard the woman's quiet voice behind her. "I'm Jessie, and this is Tyler." Sarah turned back with a smile. "Nice to meet you both, Jessie and Tyler." Later that evening, Sarah, Emma, and Meryl sat at a table in Emma's favorite restaurant, celebrating her successful first day of kindergarten. Emma regaled them with detailed descriptions of her classroom, her teacher, and the friends she'd already made, her animation a testament to her security and confidence. As Emma focused on her dessert, Meryl leaned closer to Sarah. "You mentioned meeting someone at the coffee shop this morning." Sarah nodded. "She reminded me so much of myself 5 years ago, that same look in her eyes, trying to be invisible while keeping her baby safe." She smiled slightly. "She actually came to the clinic this afternoon. We're getting her connected with resources, including temporary housing." "That's remarkable," Meryl said warmly. "The ripple effect in action." "I just hope I approached it the right way," Sarah admitted. "It's so delicate, offering help without making someone feel exposed or judged." "You had a good teacher," Meryl said with a gentle smile, glancing toward Emma, who was carefully dividing her ice cream into perfectly equal portions. "The best?" Sarah agreed, her gaze following Meryl's. As they walked to their cars after dinner, Emma skipped ahead, her energy seemingly boundless even after such a momentous day. Meryl and Sarah followed at a more sedate pace, comfortable in their shared history. "You know," Meryl said quietly, "of all the roles I've played, the stories I've told, being part of your journey has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my life." Sarah looked at her friend, emotion welling up unexpectedly. "What you did for us, what I did was simple," Meryl interrupted gently. "I noticed. I stopped. I offered help that preserved your dignity. The rest, all of this," she gestured toward Emma, toward the life Sarah had built, "that was you." They paused, watching Emma examine a flower growing through a crack in the sidewalk, her curiosity about the world as natural as breathing. "Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "the most important thing we can do is simply see someone who feels invisible." Meryl nodded, understanding the depth of that simple truth. As they said their goodbyes with promises to meet again soon, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. Her story with Meryl would continue, evolving as their lives moved forward. But the most critical chapter, the one that had begun in a parking lot on a rainy night, had come full circle. In the car on the way home, Emma asked suddenly, "Mommy, how did you and Meryl become friends?" Sarah glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, considering how to answer. "It's a long story, sweetie, but it begins with kindness, and it teaches us that sometimes helping one person can change everything." "Tell me," Emma insisted, settling back in her seat. And so as they drove home under a sky full of stars, Sarah began the story. Not the sanitized version she might have offered earlier, but the truth about the car, about the rain, about a woman who noticed when others looked away. About how lives could intersect in unexpected ways, creating patterns of connection that rippled outward to touch others. Because someday, Sarah knew, Emma would understand that their story wasn't just about hardship overcome. It was about the transformative power of being truly seen, and the countless ways that compassion, once received, could be passed forward, changing not just one life, but many. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.